ready for another round, like diving back into the live coding?
Yes, we still have 3 more to go, 2 semifinals and a final, and these will both be the traditional 25 minutes from here on out.
Yes.
So first up we have evvvvil versus alkama. Both of them did awesome shaders in the early rounds. Evil with some crazy geometric thing, and alkama with this like lightning-y Tori thing. So yeah, this is definitely going to be really exciting. So I don't know. I don't want to wait any longer. I want to get started.
Get started. So we should get started if we can. As always, Phobium behind us is behind the decks, running the music for the competition. Yes. Yeah. Good. And we will stay on the line to comment, provide some live color commentary for this, which at least one of us should be more
color commentary.
Color commentary, yeah.
As opposed to monochromatic commentary.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Which
just
is,
to clarify.
I don't even know what monochromatic commentary would be, because color commentary is, providing opinions. So what is?
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you
facts, maybe.
Yeah,
Luma
I guess
is the facts and chroma is the.
There you go.
The presentation.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so
CSS versus.
Yes. So what we're actually looking at,
we're
opposed to our crap, is Eva on the left and Alkama on the right. So Eva went straight away and just basically deleted everything. Except again, most people keep the UV calc and then that out color output in the shader, which is kind of funny. So now he's working on TR, which I can see RO and RD, which is probably ray origin and ray direction. So TR is probably trace.
We're going to do ray
yes, very typical. And I believe Alkama is setting it for the same thing, although. Or Alkama is moving, yeah. It defined pi, defined, again, a time constant, exactly the same as what he had last time, or so, more or less.
I don't know if you covered it in the last round, but what Alkama currently has, or what's currently compiled, is the default state of this version of it. So
yes, we need some place for the contestants to start, and we decided to use this really special-looking shader, and that hasn't changed in years. So everyone has this common starting point whenever we have these competitions. Got it. And some people keep it around a while, some people just get rid of it, some people work it into their production like Rody did earlier, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Especially for a shorter round, I thought that was really clever. But yeah, so right now we're seeing the standard live shader coding 3D version beginning, where both contestants are basically working on this ray marching loop, which is a way to render some mathematically defined 3D surfaces on this 2D plane that they have to work with.
Yeah, because in the end, this is just two polygons.
Yes, 2 triangles, which makes a rectangle.
Yep.
So it fills the screen, and then for every pixel, you get this piece of code run. It outputs a color, and that's GPUs, folks. Especially modern demos, 4Ks, all that kind of stuff are really using a lot of these same techniques. So
you can do a 4K in this framework though, because you would, first of all, this is WGL or GLSL.
In the GLSL.
So you would need, I guess you could you could take a shader that's the output of this and then maybe wrap it in something.
Exactly, yeah. You would wrap it in some C++ code, which here is in the editor that gives that shader to your driver.
Yeah.
And also you need to tell it to draw those 2 triangles with that program. So there's a bit of glue. And then typically for like a 4K, you might add some music. 1K, or 4K, you'll definitely add some music.
Yeah,
1K,
well, if you want to win.
Yes, 1K, you might add some music. Usually that's pretty common now. So yeah, but it's a lot of the same techniques in terms of actually doing the visuals. So I think we've seen in the last few years that live coding especially has brought in a lot of fresh blood, at least fresh from the demo scene's perspective, that are, I think, coming to do these compos and then go on to continue to do some larger 4K works. Or not, some of them also just kind of do the live coding circuit, which is really cool. So a lot of really talented people seem to be attracted by this, which I think is really nice.
So it's kind of like, well, I wouldn't call this accessible. Within the context of a demo scene, yes, probably. In the context within graphics coding, definitely. But from a dude on the street, this would probably mean nothing. But in terms of being accessible, first of all, it's GLSL. You can run it on the internet. You can do I'm guessing there's been some recruitment from Shader Toy, that community,
Definitely.
Shader.
Definitely. There's a lot of overlap.
I can't remember what it's called. There's Shader Toy and there's and one other Shader Toy.
Okay, I'm actually not familiar with that.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, with Shader Toy definitely. A lot of graphics programmers hang out there and share ideas there. And I think a lot of people, when they see these, especially, it's just a quad and it draws all these crazy 3D stuff, and it turns out there's competitions for that, right? It's definitely a gateway. So it seems that, at least with these live coding, there's a lot of overlap with the graphics community as a whole. So evvvvil got a marcher working sooner, it looks like.
Well, sooner we don't like. So we've got to this point faster.
Yeah, got to something visual faster, I should say.
So when you're doing these competitions, and you're not doing them this year, obviously, because you're sitting here with me, but you've participated in the past at Solskogen, at other parties, I guess. At this point, when you're like 5 minutes in, like, do you work on the concept before the round, I'm guessing? You know what you're going to do?
Yeah, so it's a bit back and forth. I've done ones where I go in blind intentionally, and I've done ones where I go in blind unintentionally, and I've done ones where I try to prepare a bit, and I've done ones where I try to prepare a lot. And the most fun ones by far are the ones where I prepare a bit. Yes, so if I think about it for an hour or a half hour before, and then come in with kind of an idea of a concept, there's been a couple times where I've actually tried to flesh out that idea, and then I generally fail to execute it when I do that. Some of these guys are a lot better at that particular skill than I am, so they do a lot more impressive stuff. But generally, yeah, I like it when you can kind of think of a concept for a while, and I think evvvvil in particular has that kind of approach.
Okay.
I think he focuses on a lot of taking some geometry and kind of folding it together in really interesting ways. So he'll make some kind of base shape that is like 3 or 4 primitives kind of stuck together, and then he'll kind of fractalize it in a way, if that's a way to put it. So he kind of makes it fold into each other and repeat and everything. And I think he generally thinks about the shapes he's going to put together first.
Right.
And I think that kind of shows. So he ends up with very complex shapes with several different colors and things kind of put together. I think that's really cool. I don't really know alkama's approach, but I know
it seems to be taking that black and white approach we talked about, monochromatic approach you talked about.
Yeah. The evvvvil looks like already has a sphere and some lighting, it would seem, and even some kind of background gradient, I would assume. I don't think that's geometry, because either the light's moving or we're spinning around it with the camera.
Right.
Alkama has a circle, which is probably a sphere. Looks like it. Looks like he's doing normal calculations. So then we'll see.
It's a sphere. Probably.
Yeah, we'll see that it's a sphere, exactly. So it's a, and the camera's moving slightly, it seems, which you can really only tell by looking at the edges.
Yes.
It's hard to get that effect otherwise right now.
Aliased.
But this looks all right. evvvvil looking like he's doing some kind of smoothing. Probably going to smooth between a couple objects with that. Again, I guess we're a bit into the round, but this is still pretty early for a 25-minute round, so we're still seeing a lot of setup. I think this is pretty common.
So what you're looking at is basically like, if you're not used to coding, if you're coming from it from a graphics point of view, we think about this as procedurals, maybe like procedural shapes.
Yeah, like exactly. You're kind of building the primitives. So you're gonna take a sphere and put it together with a cube, and to do that, you need to make a sphere and you need to make a cube, right? So, so we're kind of seeing all these being defined and the way they're going to fit together.
Oh, now he has.
Yeah, so this is the normal. So this is some kind of vector that determines where the face is pointing. I had a hard time explaining that on a conceptual level other than the mathematical definition.
I always thought about it as like the problem we had when we set up this room, actually, is like with the glass behind us, the normal, like if we were able to turn the glass around,
yeah, the reflections would be wrong,
reflection would follow, right?
Yeah.
Well, they wouldn't follow, they would distort according to how they hit the plane. That is the, that didn't make it simpler.
Right, but speaking of reflections, it looked like evvvvil added a slightly more complicated shading model, or lighting model, so his surface got a little bit shiny. Before it was completely what we call diffuse, so light kind of bounces in all directions and then things look kind of flat or matte. But then there was a bit of shininess added. And now we see the sphere has been replaced by a cylinder. And again, with evvvvil's approach, I think this is pretty typical. Going to build some kind of primitive made of other primitives, and then going to fold it. That's right. That's what I would predict. And again, alkama is a bit of a wild card. I don't, at least for me, I don't really know what he tends to go for. But I was definitely very impressed by his last performance.
Yeah.
Now it's a bit early to tell.
Well,
there's some lighting.
Yeah.
Some moving lighting. Again, that may be the light moving or it's us rotating or something. No way to know yet, because there's no frame of reference. So
I guess it's both.
yeah, it could be any. It's up to interpretation.
Like there's no, like the concept of a camera,
Yeah.
the concept of a viewer, the concept of eyes. It's all.
Yeah, typically in graphics programming, that is how that works, right? You don't move the camera. I mean, you do conceptually, but the way you make it rendered is you kind of move everything inversely. It's kind of funny.
Like the old adage, or the old saying, like, which is mal contributed or attributed to Michelangelo, or whatever it was, whoever the sculptor, like
Michelangelo.
Yeah. How do you do the statue of David? You take away everything that's not David,
Right. Yeah.
which is, he did not say that apparently, but it's a nice, funny, pithy internet fact.
Abraham Lincoln probably.
Yeah, probably.
He said that on the internet. Now Evil has added some more shapes to his base shape, right? So now here it's this kind of, looks like a kind of cube, and the cube is being repeated. And the way that that's typically done with this ray marching approach is you don't actually draw many cubes. You actually fold the space, so the space repeats.
Right.
So you take the space around the cube and you make that happen many times. It's a bit of a strange backwards concept, but it's
This is how we end up on the ship in Event Horizon. Is that what you're telling me?
yes. It looks like he's headed in that direction. So now we've got some rings, which is a cylinder with planes, and that's another cylinder taken away, and then repeated again by repeating the space and tweaking that geometry a bit. So again, a more complicated base shape. Alkama has added a fromage variable, so I don't know if
Heading
he's
into
making
cheese
cheese.
country.
Yeah, and also Alkama has also added a more complicated lighting model, so you can see things are a bit shiny.
Nice bit of colors too.
Yeah, very subtle. And here, Evil's adding the colors.
There you go.
Again,
We're at that
different
point
shapes.
in very near the half point, where everybody starts having colors, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, this is definitely, at least from the entries that I've seen from Evil, this is definitely the formula. Make a base shape out of a few different primitives and add some colors to those individual primitives. And if he starts folding it, I'm calling it.
Well, it's spot on. I am interested in what Alkama's doing. You who have watched multiple of these, like, again, does it come down to strategy? Do you have something in your head, plan it, or does that generally not pay off because you actually need time at the end to tweak it to make
For
it
some people, it pays off. Some people have maybe it's the patience to really internalize those ideas.
Yeah.
And they can really pull it off. I find that that's difficult for me, and I like that feeling of being inspired by what's happening in the moment, which for better sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't. So I think ultimately though, even the people that are memorizing a lot have a mix of both.
Yeah.
It's just where that balance is different.
Well, at some point you have to show what you're doing anyway.
Yeah, and also you need to know how a ray marcher works. Like that's you're gonna have to remember that, even if you don't if you do 2D stuff all the time, but if you're doing a lot of these compos, you want to change it up too. So you're gonna have to learn that eventually. Like a skateboarder's not gonna skip learning how to kickflip. It's like bread and butter kind of stuff. Anyway, Evil, we can see, has started to, again, fold the shape, repeat the shape. So just building on the building blocks. And you can see here, this is interesting because if you add some rotations in some of these foldings, you get this weird stuff where the objects kind of get cut off and cut into each other. And it looks a lot more complex than the base shape. So you get this whole sum is greater than the whatever it is.
Like free complexity.
Yes. And Evil does really well at that. He's able to tweak a lot of the parameters to find interesting geometry in these basic shapes.
You can't just brute force this. You have to have some idea of what you're doing, otherwise you're going to end up with something just noise, right?
So I can imagine he might have made up this base shape, for example.
Right.
But he also has the experience to know how to fold space around it and also look for interesting patterns that, again, look a lot more complex than they are. And that's a great strategy.
We should also, at this point, say that like all the live competitions that we run at Solskogen are live voting. So you go to the URL at the bottom of the screen, woohoo.solskogen.no, to vote. You vote during the live coding competitions, the live graphics competitions. You can't wait until they're done. So you determine who wins and goes to the final.
And this is your chance.
This is your chance.
So Evil started to add some camera movement, and now alkama.
Wow.
Sorry, Gidegit, who's running our stream here. It has suddenly made the geometry much more interesting, and I didn't really see any progress in this, or couldn't really predict this, so that was really exciting.
It came out of nowhere.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. Again, this kind of folding, and then you can see these rotations that are in that. It's very cool.
Yeah.
Very interesting geometry here. Cool. And again, Evil's moving the camera, but I think it's the same geometry as before. But I'm guessing there's going to be some additional folding and movement as well. Because again, when you fold the space, that fold doesn't have to be static. You can move where you fold it, right? And that's kind of like what alkama is doing a bit as well.
Hall of mirrors where the mirrors actually rotate.
Move, yeah, and you get a lot of
that's kind of cool.
quote unquote free complexity.
Yes. I didn't mean to belittle your.
No. That's a great analogy. So now Evil is adding more to the base shape, right? He's adding more cylinders into the original shape.
Yeah.
And it gets these different lines and different shapes. And
that is really cool.
It's just like in sound design, you might make some bass sound and add some distortion, and then go back and tweak the bass, and it brings out new stuff. It's the same idea.
Yeah. All of these overtones are making it interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So the folding is like adding overtones.
Yeah.
You need something to add them to.
Yeah. I'm interested. So alkama also has a little bit more of an interesting camera move. Now, it's rotating, but it also has like this is where we make fun of ourselves with the graphic on the internet, like pan tilt. Everything is pan.
Yes.
Was it? Yeah. Everything is pan.
It's really cool though. Alkama also had a very similar kind of camera style in his last entry, and I didn't see the code to do it. Admittedly, I didn't pick that out, but it kind of looks like some basic sinus stuff.
Yep.
But I think it's really effective, especially how slow it moves. I love when especially cameras move slow, because it gives you a larger sense of scale to the world, for sure, when things are moving slower.
Oh, you can't hear this, but I can hear the music the Phobium is playing.
Excellent.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
I wish I could hear it as well. Shout out to Phobium, who's been DJing all of our live compos. And doing a fantastic job.
You should also go and get his music. It's on Bandcamp and also on phobium.net. So support artists, especially during this time, but always support artists, please.
One thing I noticed, Evil improved his shading. I don't know if he did this earlier on or if he did this recently, but you can see where the objects meet, there's a little bit of shading, like it's darker.
Right.
So that's, that's ambient occlusion.
Yes.
And that's, it simulates how light doesn't quite get in those corners, and it really adds a lot of,
it feels
I don't want to say depth, but you can see the contact.
It feels like everything is actually connected, rather than just have the floating geometry.
Exactly. Which ultimately, we are looking at some floating geometry,
but it's like,
but any way you can make it look more physical is the effect you want. So. And then alkama, the reflections here are quite cool.
Yeah, they are.
Also interesting to note about DJing, so alkama typically DJs for this competition at Revision. And I don't know, I think he's been a programmer as well for a long time, at least to some degree. So, but I think traditionally in the demo scene he's been a musician.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool to see him. Again, I'm hesitant to say make this transition because I think he's been a coder as well for a long time, but it is cool to see him start with this competition, right?
Yeah.
And is that vignette he just added, which made things a lot moodier, which I'm a big fan of. I think that's quite cool.
Yeah. Like, I hope Evil, there's 7 minutes left. I hope Evil adds some sort of post-processing to this, some sort of shading, not shading, but some sort of grading.
Yeah. We're getting into a point where it was pretty clear that Evil developed a bit faster in the beginning. But then, this is pretty late, like a late round in this competition, and you can tell that Evil developed a little earlier, but at the same time almost stagnated. Mm-hmm. At this level of competition, it's that can get you. Although you can see he's added these I guess light beams, right?
Yes, laser beams.
So I think that's another thing that we've seen more recently in these competitions, especially is this kind of look where I actually am not 100% sure how they do it in this framework, but I believe you can add objects that just accumulate some value as you go by them, rather than necessarily hit it.
Okay.
So here you can kind of get this glowy effect.
So what's funny about evils, or not funny, but what's interesting about that is once those lines came in, the world instantly became more interesting because they have different fidelities, like it's textures as well.
Exactly.
Something is sharp, something is soft,
Yes.
like it feels like it's actually being built.
Yeah, it feels much more complex again. Alkama has completely changed the colors and look of this thing, which is really nice.
If you're wondering why we sometimes stay quiet, it's because we're getting guests in the studio. We're watching the voting come in, and it looks like people took our suggestion to go vote. Oh,
Yeah.
there's some noise function now.
Not more, and it's been going back and forth, which is cool. Yeah. So here we can see it. Yeah, some noise has been added to those lightning bolts, just like we saw with alkama in the last round.
Yeah.
It's very similar now. That gives that kind of electric look, and I think we've seen that from Evil in previous competitions as well. So he's definitely no stranger to these techniques.
There's nothing wrong with. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now he gets pulsating feel, and that
okay.
added a lot. That was a really cool effect.
This suddenly got like density and atmosphere is what I'm looking for, the
movement
word.
as well.
Yeah, movement, atmosphere, and like these random camera cuts as well.
Yeah.
Well, not random, but these camera cuts.
And alkama went with the fisheye.
Interesting. Whoa.
Not a choice I would have expected, but I like it with this shape, with this scene. I think that's really cool. And with these longer, they look like camera cuts, but I mentioned that with Christian earlier. That's typically done by making like one long camera track, or conceptually, which is a bunch of like sine movements, and then you cut time into different parts of that, and that's a really great way to get like multiple camera angles, quote unquote, from just this really long base shape.
So you just make a base shape that's relatively sensibly oriented in terms of space.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to look away from the thing.
Yeah.
You're just going to kind of fly around it a bit. But at the same time, you have all these like out of phase movements.
Yes.
That over time had a lot of variation. So it's definitely been great to see how Evil has started to progress again in the competition. Because again, he started off really strong, and then it looked like he was staying still for a while.
Yeah.
And then now has started to add a lot to the scene. It's just some of these periodic movements are so effective.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there hasn't been any change in the overall shape of this world for a little bit.
right, yeah,
It's probably pretty happy with where it is. And now we're starting to have the shading, the atmosphere, the light, the extra effects.
yes. We might actually see though that he might fold space a little more too.
Yeah.
Which I'm just very curious to see what that looks like at this point, right? And it may be worse, so it's probably smart that he's not doing that, or maybe he will do it. Yeah, I'm kind of excited to see where that goes.
Yeah.
Sorry?
No, it's just it's interesting to see how he went from black background, lit objects through reflections, and then bright background reflections, and sort of. I mean, I'm going to just venture a guess and say this is just inverted.
I think it is as well, yeah. But it gave a completely different look, and I think it's pretty cool that.
It is stuttering.
Yeah. I think especially the shader on the left is not a cheap one.
Yeah.
For a GPU to evaluate, which is fine, right? Like it's real time and it's still fast enough. So I think that's well. All right. So now we're seeing even more variation in Evils. He's adding more differently colored light beams. And
I mean, I was about to say, of course you're going to add teal, or yellow, teal,
yellow or orange, and
blue.
Again, it's a classic color scheme. I think it was called the cinematic color scheme for a long time, maybe still is, but there's a reason they use it. It's a good contrast.
All right. The votes are still very, very close. So if you're sitting at home watching this and have a clear favorite, or you're jumping back and forth, there's a minute and a half left. So it might be time to pick your favorites and stick with them.
And this is fun too. We're seeing Evil make some pretty drastic changes at this stage, which is, for lack of a better word, pretty ballsy with just a minute left. But you got to respect that. Whereas alkama is looking at a lot of these like really subtle changes in grading and a
the
little bit of
movement
colors. Yeah, indeed, the movement has seemed to have gotten slightly more complex.
Yeah, it feels like it's growing, expanding, growing.
Yeah. I think it's just twisting, but it really adds a lot. And then just working on getting that framing in a way that he really wants. So I think really cool. But this is what that extra 10 minutes does.
Yeah, for sure. Like there's a big difference. And of course, this is one of the semifinals. So
yeah, I think they're taking it a bit more seriously here.
Yeah, plus you wouldn't get to this point unless you knew what you were doing. Probably.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So very, very cool. 30 seconds left. Barely any time, and we're still seeing things change. We're still seeing things evolve. Actually, Eva went back a bit. Took a couple steps back, which is probably smart. It looks a bit better now.
Right. Last 10-ish seconds to get your vote in. If you're hearing this, you're probably 10 seconds behind on the stream, so it might be too late, but still. Yeah. 3, 2, 1, and hands away from the keyboards. The first semi-final of the light coding competition of the last Solskogen is over. Can we get a big hand for the contestants? And we are looking at the scores again. Here are the two semi-finalists, and do you want to announce the scores?
Right, so evvvvil with 48 points, and alkama with 31 points. So evvvvil is our winner.
Yay. evvvvil is our winner and then goes to the final.
Yes.
It's going to happen later.
Yes. So congratulations to both contestants. These are really, really, really good shaders. This is a very high level in this competition. Even for these guys, I think this is really good stuff, and I expected a lot. Yeah. They're both very, very talented. So.